On this episode of Sports Opinions Podcast, the first episode back after the new year and starting off year number 3 of the show, I have college football analyst for the Pac-12 network, Yogi Roth, on, and we talk about Pac-12 football, basketball, and the conference, how it is as a whole. We talk some NFL playoffs, get some predictions, talk about quarterback play, and then we talk about some uplifting stories in sports and how the humanity in sports is really something we should all be looking for outside of just the X's, O's, scores, and stats. So without any further ado, enjoy the show. What's up, sports fans? Welcome to the Sports Opinions Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Alex Cuesta, and I have to say it feels good to be back for the new year. First show back in the new year for Sports Opinions Podcast proper. About 2 days ago, I recorded Cuesta Dos with my brother, so that was the first official show under the Sports Opinions umbrella, but this is the first Sports Opinions Podcast proper show, and I'm really pleased to be bringing you the guest that I have on here today. He's a college football analyst at the Pac-12 network, host of the Yogi Roth Show podcast, and filmmaker, Mr. Yogi Roth. What's going on, man?
Not much. Happy New Year.
That's, having a great time over here. Now, are you over in California? I know we're 3 hours away. What part of the West Coast are you on?
I am. I'm in Marina Del Rey, Venice Beach community. So yeah, SoCal, and loving every bit of it. Been about 15 years, almost 16 years now.
So I don't want to get off on the wrong foot, but I might hate you because I'm over here in New York, and I'm dealing with this cold and this winter over here, and you're hanging out over in SoCal.
Oh, yeah. No, totally, bro. I mean, my family is from the East Coast. I'm from Pennsylvania, and I talked to my brother today, and he's in New York walking in snow, and I had shorts on going to yoga class. So, yeah, man. Hey, I lived your life. I know what it's like back there. Made the move.
Yeah. Maybe one day. If it's in the cards one day, maybe I'll make it out there. But, for now, just going to enjoy what I got. But so let's get going. We're here to talk some sports. You're over on the West Coast. You are a college football analyst for the Pac-12 network. So we're going to get going. We're going to talk a little Pac-12. I don't necessarily want to talk the X's and O's in football or basketball. I kind of want to talk about the conference status as a whole, specifically the two major sports, football and basketball. I got to say, I'm 31 years old. When I was growing up, when it came to football, USC, UCLA, Stanford, even Oregon was in there, Colorado, they were, always threats in football, playing really well. They were threatening. And in basketball, I grew up an Arizona fan. I loved Arizona, still like Arizona. My name's Alex. The big A just kind of attracted a young kid. But even then, UCLA and the Pac-10 at the time was a power. Now I'm looking at it, and I looked at the rankings in both the college football playoff final ranking and the current basketball ranking. Yogi, there's only 3 Pac-12 teams represented in each right now. What's going on with that conference since basically Oregon's massive outburst in football? What's been going on there lately?
Well, I think rankings and time of year is interesting. Like I think in basketball, there was a time where like 8 teams were ranked earlier this year or something like that. In football, there was a time when I think it was like 7 teams were ranked in the top 25. Like it's just kind of the ebbs and flows of the year. I think that the discussion, if you're going to have it one way, you got to go the other, right? There's a world where there's a huge argument around Power 5 football that says,
yep, it
doesn't matter how good your conference is. It matters how good your top 1 or 2 teams is. And in the case of the ACC, or 1 team. In the case of the SEC, it'd be LSU, Georgia, Bama, right? And you can kind of make your arguments. Big 12, it's Oklahoma. Baylor came out of the scene this year, but they just lost their coach. So I think there's just an argument around what would you rather have? Would you rather have one dominant team? Maybe. That's what it was when I was at SC and we were rolling and you were growing up watching our teams. Mm-hmm. Or would you rather a competitive conference and have 2 teams? Like think about the Pac-12 this year. 5 and 6 was Oregon, Utah. Throughout the majority of the college football playoff rankings, they're 5, 6, 7, right? We thought it was going to be a pseudo play-in game to the playoffs. So I think that the last couple of years it wasn't great, but this year to me, college football was kind of everything you could ask for in terms of being in the conversation. It wasn't like I was beating the drum for the conference all year. Like, people got it. Oregon and Utah were really talented, and Utah didn't show up in the title game. And I think the same thing for basketball, which is probably a different conversation. But overall, to me, every conference has had their downturn. It was the Pac-12 conference's turn, but I think when you look at it, even projecting the postseason in hoops, there's Colorado, there's UW, there's Arizona, there's Oregon. Every analyst in the country would say I wouldn't be shocked if that team made a run in March. So I don't think it's as dire as maybe historicals over the last 3 years would say.
And from that perspective, it's kind of, I guess I'm from an outsider's perspective looking in, where when I'm watching college football specifically, the unfortunate part being a fan on the outside looking in, I'm more of a, defunct Big East fan because I'm a Jersey boy, so I like Rutgers. But now that they're in the Big Ten, I'm kind of looking there and outside looking in. And for me, I was looking at it at the end of the year going, even if Utah wins, if other things happen, they're going to push them out because they don't have, I guess, that type of pedigree. And I guess that's another conversation where, unfortunately, pedigree in both March Madness and in now the CFP has more to do with what you've earned. But it was kind of unfortunate to me when I'm looking at it going, if Utah wins, they need things to happen in order for the committee to actually put them in.
Yeah, I disagree with that based on sitting in the committee chair. I thought that a year ago, totally. But I went down to Dallas, and they do this thing every year. You'd love it. And you do a mock selection. And they basically give you a year, you study that year, and you come in and you go hard. And they show you what it's like on a given weekend for the playoff. And this, I don't know what it's been like in years past, but for us, it was the year when TCU and Baylor got left out. And they were 3, 4, or 5, or 3 and 5 heading in. You thought TCU was in. I think they were 3 the previous week, and they won and happened to get left out of the playoff. And what was cool, and I got to sit in the chair's seat. You basically role play. And I role played Rob Mullins, who's been the committee chair the last couple of years.
That's awesome.
It was awesome. And Rob was there, and I've known Rob, and he kind of guided me through the process. And what you realize is that there's a whole fandom of college football that you're a part of, I'm a part of, and millions are a part of. There's money around TV games and commercials and advertising that's bonkers. There's TV dollars that are crazy. But what really matters in college football is 13 people. At the end of the day, that's what matters. And they're charged, in their words, to put the 4 best teams into the playoff. And they have a series of ways they get to 4 best. The challenge, and there's ways where I think the playoff process could improve, but ultimately, the 13 people are of the highest esteem in college football, whether they were former players like Ronnie Lott or former coaches like Frank Beamer or current sitting athletic directors like Rob Mullins or former military members who played college football, right? Like Connie Rice was a member of the committee when it first got going.
Yep.
So I trust that group, and they're not sitting there saying, oh, what's best for the brand of college football. They're saying, who are the 4 best teams? And when you looked at the eye test and you saw Baylor and TCU that year, in that committee's eyes, they were like Ohio State, what they did in their Big Ten title game, smashing Wisconsin, I think is what they did.
Oh, yeah.
They deserve to get in.
52-0. I think it was like an insane win.
Exactly. And same thing with Clemson this year, or even Utah. Like, Utah, to me, got respected all year. That's where I disagree with you. Like, they were solid. Like, they were in pole position. They just had to win. This is heading into the Pac-12 title game. Since 1996, they were the 5th best rushing defense. Since 1996, not insane. In the country, in the CFP era, they were averaging 53 or 56 yards per game. So my point is that gets thrown around a lot, and I feel you on the brand power, and that's why I light up Paul Feinbaum when he sounds like a fool on television. and I'm not even saying that laughing. I'm saying that truthfully when he says no one wants to see Utah. It doesn't matter what people want to see. And that's where I do trust the committee and don't think that they think brand. I think teams that don't have a brand get hosed early on, right? Like if Georgia's 6-1 or 6-0, they're going to be a top 6 team. If Utah's 6-0, they're going to be a top 14 team, just like Minnesota was. That's fair and that's real. But when it gets down to it with 1-loss teams, there's just not enough to me to say the brand carries over how they play when there's a differentiator.
So I have two things. First, you talked about when you were sitting there doing the mock committee, which I didn't know they did, which is awesome. And if anyone in that situation is listening, I would love to go and be in the mock committee.
There
That
you
just
go.
sounds so much fun. But one thing you said is they're putting in the four best teams. And I actually have a problem with that because, like you said, it's down to 13 human beings making that decision. And we all know humans are flawed, and that's fine. But for me, it should be when it comes to a playoff, it's more about who deserves to get in that playoff than who would be the best. Because we all know in sports, the best doesn't always win. It has to do with who did it at those moments that they needed to get it done. And to me, a team that works their tail off all year, maybe they might not be, Central Florida to me was a perfect example. I know a lot of people scoff at Central Florida and their two undefeated years, but for me, they deserve to have a shot at least the second year to at least compete for it. And they kind of got laughed off the stage. So for me, I think it should be the four most deserving teams, not the four best. And second, are you in favor of an expansion of the playoff?
Yeah, dude, I'm with you. I mean, and we would agree on this one where if it's about the four best teams, then we should just kind of flip a coin on who the fourth is because it's going to be Bama, Clemson, and Ohio State every year. You
Yeah.
know, like their rosters are loaded, right?
And their
But
recruiting just does it by itself as long as the coaches hang around, basically.
here's an example. Alabama, I believe it's 69 4 and 5-star athletes on this year's roster
Insane.
coming out of high school. Utah, I think they had like 9 or 8. You know, like just think of the disparity, right? So if we're going to do so the four best thing, that's why I don't agree with the AP poll or the coaches poll. Like I think there's so many people that vote and you just can't watch it enough. Like I live and breathe it. You can't watch every snap. You really can't give an opinion. Like I think you should have, if I was going to redo it, playoff aside, but just in terms of voting, there'd be a tier that's only job is to be the overview. There'd be then tier of experts per conference. Now the committee does that. Everybody is responsible for a conference. 2 people are responsible for every conference, and they present the conference every week, let alone the best team within the conference every week and what they've done. So if you're, Bob Bowlesby from the Big 12, or you are, he wasn't on the committee necessarily, but if you're an AD from the Big 12 or an AD from the ACC and you're not watching a West Coast game, like Ronnie Lott's presenting it to you. So they cover their T's and dots their I's. Like I don't think the premise is flawed. I think there's elements of the process is flawed in terms of like the recusal process, I think is flawed. There's a couple things that I would change, but overarching playoff, I would 100% change where we're at. And it's not just because I work for the Pac-12 network. It's because there's no uniformity, right? So the 2 teams that are playing in the title game, they both have one thing in common, and nobody necessarily wants to talk about what that is, but they played 8 conference games.
Yep.
Right. I mean, it's just a fact. LSU, I love their fact that they are balling, they're doing their thing. I love they went out and played Texas on the road, but the rest of their non-conference schedule was not impressive. I'm talking Georgia Southern, I'm talking Northwestern State, Utah State.
Yogi, you can't go there, though. They play in the vaunted SEC.
Well, I think that's like where everybody needs – that's to me where I think it should change. Because nobody, when they went to the playoff, when you talk to people that were in the room, right, whether it's school presidents, conference commissioners, nobody thought of the unintended consequence, which would be 1 or 2 or 3 conferences would be left out, right? If you think about it, that's been Big 12, Big 10, Pac-12. Those are the conferences that have been left out.
Yep.
Right. When you look at the history, it's a small history, but nobody thought that, and nobody thought that it would dominate college football like it has. Think about week 1 when Oregon played Auburn. The loser didn't get talked about again until November.
Exactly.
Right. Auburn played
crazy.
Bama, and Oregon. They lost ASU, and they were kind of making a little run for it.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody thought that, and that's an unfortunate element to college football, because then it becomes about the money, and it becomes about 4 best versus, or 4 most deserving, whatever. It becomes about the playoff versus becoming about the season. And that was the point, was that college football is the best because every game matters. And with the playoff, that's the case. But the minute you lose, it's like you don't exist anymore. And I think it's hurt attendance. I think it's hurt viewership. It's probably hurt ad sales.
I think it's hurt the bowls in general. The bowls really don't matter. And I used to love bowl season. And if you eat, sleep, and breathe college football, you probably still enjoy it. But if your school's not playing in that bowl, I don't think there's too many people watching outside of that.
Agreed. Yeah. The challenge is that the numbers actually prove that everybody's watching. Like the numbers rate off the charts on television. Nobody goes to the games. Nobody really cares. But what else are we all doing over the holidays? So I don't know where they are watching. Like none of my friends necessarily watch. I do because I'm a nerd around it. But that's always the surprising part. I would love to see, we talked about it on a podcast that I host today with my broadcast partners and our producer around like, could you fold in the bowl game to be, almost like a regular season game and you play it quicker? We don't have to wait as long anymore. Now you got to change recruiting and the early signing period and stuff, but there's a lack of desire to watch matchups. There's just a desire to watch football. And people would watch anything when you put it on. I think we could elevate the bowl matchups and things like that are happening, right? The Pac-12 is having better bowl games. Look at the LA Bowl coming. The Vegas Bowl has flipped and become a premier bowl with the SEC, and I think it's the Big Ten against the Pac-12. So it's getting there, but there's work to do.
Yeah, I think that we eventually need to get closer to the FCS model with the tournament because they always a lot of people complain, well, these kids might get hurt. I mean, we have a lot of FCS guys in the NFL, and none of them have complained about the wear and tear from their FCS tournaments. They lived the glory days of having to go and play another 4 games with high-level atmosphere and having a great time. Some of the best memories, you could probably ask, Joe Flacco and guys like that. What was their greatest memories, playing in the FCS tournament and balling out?
Yeah.
So I think that we need to get closer to the FCS, and I think it would be the whole entire argument is, well, teams will get destroyed. Well, Oklahoma just got destroyed. Ohio State's been destroyed. Michigan State has gotten destroyed in this playoff system. So for me, the whole entire teams will get destroyed argument is a moot point to me.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, to your point, I interviewed Mackenzie Milton. I've known him for a while. I love that guy. And they deserved a chance. I mean, and I get it. I asked Herb Street this. He came on our Pac-12 Network show around the playoff time when both Utah and Oregon were kind of, looking at each other down the barrel. And I said, for our whole entire lives, we're taught that you win or go home when it's like when it's on the line, right? And yet when we get into this world of college football and the argument was around the championship weekend, if LSU lost, should they still go? If Ohio State lost, should they still go? And I get his point was, hey, it's about 4 best, not what you did most recently. But I just, to me, there's no world that exists when you lose your most recent game that you still get into a championship environment. And I just don't buy that. And I get it. I mean, if those 2 teams lost, they still might be the best. But I think there's a lot of years where the best team didn't win the Natty. I could look at USC when we played Iowa in 2002. We were best team in the country, but we lost 2 early season games. You could look at Stanford when they beat Iowa. They would have played Alabama that year as well as anybody. Like, and I'm coming from a West Coast lens from the historicals out here, but there's other examples where you may not be the best team at the time, which is why we love playoffs, which is why we love basketball, because you have an early season loss, you get a chance to take a run at it. And I'd love to see it. And I think fans would absolutely go crazy over it.
It would be so much fun, and the Cinderella matchups would be great. And speaking of lots of fun, were you locked in for the first weekend of NFL wildcard football? Because this might be one of the best wildcard weekends I've ever remembered seeing in my life.
Yeah, for the most part, I was. In college football ends, I try to hang out with our son and my wife, so I'm not crazy. But we got in 3 of the 4 games. Like one of them, we kind of were just tracking on our phone. But we're huge Seahawk fans in this household, so we watched every snap of that one for sure. And it was fun, man. It was a great weekend indeed.
Probably the best, like I said, one of the best I've ever seen. And one of the things that came out of it, you told me you love quarterbacks, basically all quarterbacks. So here we go. 2 of the best of all time were eliminated this week, Drew Brees and Tom Brady. And now the elder statesmen are Ryan Tannehill, Russell Wilson, and Aaron Rodgers. Like, it's pretty crazy in my mind to think that those 3 guys are basically the elder statesmen of any group, because to me, they're still young guys.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. I think I felt this 'cause I work with high school quarterbacks,
Hmm.
and I think high school is 5 years ahead of everything. So in 2009, I went to TCU's campus, did a quarterback camp, and I said, "Oh, here comes Texas quarterbacks," because you could tell these kids were just getting trained differently. It wasn't the best athlete playing in the spread or the wildcat when that was kind of hitting vogue. It was like they were passers and they knew how to read defenses. And I saw that then, and I said, "Oh, here comes the spread." And when Marcus Mariota was playing in college, I said, "Here it comes, it's coming to the league," and now it's here. And I just think this next wave, it's so different than the outgoing one that you just referenced. Pat Mahomes, right? You can kind of go down the list this year and guys coming out, whether it's Tua or Lamar a couple years earlier. Like you just look at the QBs, you know, look at the games. To your point of the names that you brought up, Deshaun. I mean, you look at Houston, KC. That's the future of the league. You know, when you look at like the faces of it, Deshaun and Pat Mahomes, and it's gonna be fun to watch this. And I think it's exciting, right? Because the 10-year-old now is going to grow up with those guys versus how we grew up. We grew up with Brady and Breeze and Manning.
We did. And, and it's interesting though, because we've been going down this road and it's been a big media thing that the quarterback is coming and the quarterback has been here. The quarterback has always been the most important guy. It's a more passing league, yet we see the teams that are dominant this year run the football and play defense. And I think it's a crazy thing. You talk about Deshaun and Patty Mahomes being the absolute future, but then I still turn around and say it still comes down to what those guys do within the pocket. One of the reasons I love watching Lamar Jackson, I think he's a great talent in terms of football player. But bottom line is, to me, his window is very small because a running guy that runs as often as he does, who's not a great pocket passer, can only get you to a championship for so many years because he gets his first major injury. There goes his major style. And now you don't have to spy him as hard. Right now, it's, 10 on 10, where it used to be 11 on defense, 10 on offense because the quarterback's just throwing the ball. So, I don't know how much the mobile quarterback is going to take over. Because even Patty Mahomes, I think he's going to slow down. He has that ankle injury. I don't see him running around as much. And Russell Wilson has really slowed down in running. He's more of a pocket guy, and he's developed great. Russell Wilson's just a great quarterback. So, I don't know. I think we're going to go back to the pocket passer. I really do.
Well, I would define. I think those guys are pocket passers. I think that's like my point. That when I saw it that day in Texas, I was like, these guys can throw, and they're the best athlete, and they're getting trained to be the best quarterback as the best athlete from 10 years old on. And I would never say Pat Mahomes is dual threat. Dude's a quarterback. Like, I just think the terms, right, the buckets that we're trying to put guys in, same thing out in Hollywood, right? Like, oh, what do you do? You're in this bucket. Well, that's kind of blown up. There's crossover everywhere. I think at quarterback too. I think you got to be able to move. I think if I asked a GM or a college recruiting coordinator, head coach, who would you want? A tree that can't really move, that can deal, or Drew Lock, right? The guy who went to the Broncos. They take Drew Lock all day long.
I
Drew
like
Lock
Drew Lock a lot.
he's a two guard who was offered to play hoops at Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Like I just think that is uh, I think drop back quarterback, pro style quarterback. They're nice terms, but at the end of the day, like if you can't throw, you can't play at the highest of levels. You can't manipulate a pocket. You can't survive. You can't understand the picture in front of you and mirror it with the offense that you're running. You got no chance, especially at the NFL. And I think even now in college, because defenses are getting so much more athletic. So I see less and less trees on the high school circuit, and I see more and more athletes that are twitchy, that can bend, that can throw, that can read, that are way more refined than they were. Like Lamar Jackson was not refined coming out of high school as a quarterback. But we see guys like him that now have taken 5,000 drops in high school because they're a 4-year starter or whatever it may be. So I think the position's in an interesting place. And it's going to be in flux because that's what's coming up, and that's what these high schools are running and colleges are running. So that'll be fun. It'll be fun to see kind of what history ends up telling us in 10 years.
Yeah. To your point, I really feel like, if you look back at some of the greats, it's really been Aaron Rodgers is very much that style where he's probably one of the best pocket passers we've ever seen, but he can sure as hell move. He can go on
Hmm.
the run and he can throw on the run. But you look at guys who are the other greats like Elway, Steve Young, even
Hmm.
Brett Favre. All those guys can move outside the pocket. They weren't statues. They would drop back, and if they had to get outside the pocket, they would. And they were very good at doing it. I just think to your point, it's that more quarterbacks are getting trained like those greats
Hmm.
to emulate them more than to emulate your Brady's and your Eli Mannings and Peyton Mannings and guys like that. So, it'll be interesting. It'll definitely be interesting to see where we go from here. Now, do you have any feeling on this divisional weekend, or are you still just kind of a little detached from it?
Oh no, I got a lot of feelings on it. I mean,
Let's hear. What do you got? Who do we
I
got winning
mean,
this weekend?
I think the Niners. I got to know their DC a little bit when he was with Pete in Seattle. He's awesome. Everybody's been around the Niners raves about the culture that they built there, just how
Yep.
consistent they've been. So I'm all in there.
How do you feel
Uh,
about Garoppolo? He's kind of I don't know what he is. He's a statue, but he's not mobile. He's weird.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he's not. I always look at athletes and can you move? Can you feel? Can you adjust? The movement in the pocket, like Jared Goff's not going to be the best athlete on the field, but he operates a pocket. Like you ever study him in the pocket and dude, dude can move. It's the
He has
phone
great
book
feet.
phrase.
Great
Yeah,
feet.
exactly. So
Hey,
I
Jimmy
go with
G's
them.
definitely the best looking guy on the field every single time. He has that going for
Yeah, he
him.
does. He does. I go with them in Baltimore. I think what Lamar is doing is just incredible for the game. Got to be around him at the Heisman a couple of years ago. Big fan. Casey Houston is going to be really fun to watch. I probably don't know enough about the details of injuries and health, but I love Deshaun, Elite 11 guy. I love, obviously, everything that Pat's doing. So I just want a good game. And then Aaron Rodgers is probably my favorite guy to watch and study. Try to watch as many of his games as possible. But Pete's, other than my parents, the greatest mentor I've ever had. So I'm going Seattle all the way, man. I got them taking a run at the whole thing.
Do you think that they're going to run the table? That's a lot of magic from Russell Wilson. That's a lot of magic from
Yeah,
Russ,
dude, total. I'm a believer, dude. I'm a total fan.
especially
Well,
with Carson being out. I know beast mode's there, but is Pete Carroll going to give him the ball on the one and the game on the line next time?
yeah, we'll find out. I mean, I think Pete's one of the best coaches in the history of the game with what he's done, a decade at SC, almost a decade now, almost with Seattle. How he's built the culture, how he's brought. I mean, there's not a coach in the history of the game, in my opinion, that would bring back Marshawn Lynch the way that Marshawn exited.
And
And
Turbin. And bring back Turbin. He brings back familiar guys that know him and Russell Wilson. He's a smart guy. He's an extremely smart individual.
yeah, well, I just say like when Marshawn left, he didn't leave like hugging babies and blowing kisses. He
No.
left kind of in a fury.
Yep.
And he's come back and he's been amazing for that culture. And I think that happens when guys get a little bit older, a little bit more removed. So I couldn't believe it when he did it, but Pete is the only guy that could pull it off. So yeah, I'm rolling with them, man, all day long.
Can we also talk about Pete Carroll? I want to live my life. He just looks like the happiest guy in the world. You would never know he's the oldest coach in the league. You wouldn't
Yeah,
know that judging by his demeanor, just how he is. And he's not that grumpy looking coach. Like, he's not afraid to show you when he's happy. He's also not afraid to show you when he's pissed. He's like a guy you could look at and go, I'll go take a walk and sit down at a bar and have a beer with that dude because he just seems like he'd be a fun dude to hang around.
he is. He's incredible. He's exactly what you see. Fun loving, great energy, really well intended. He's phenomenal, man. Like I could talk about him for hours and would love to. I check out his book if you haven't, called Win Forever. It's awesome. Chance to work on it with him and kind of see his DNA. And in a world where it's really easy to be pessimistic and negative and everything's falling apart around you, Pete's the opposite. He's constantly saying that something good is just about to happen, and that bleeds over to his team, to his staff, and his team plays in the absence of fear. That's not a fear-based culture, and he's incredible, man. I hope they win. I think Pete has always gotten, I don't want to say too much praise for stuff off the field, but he's never gotten credited enough for the type of coach he is. He's a mastermind on defense. I think he's a Hall of Fame coach. So I hope they take a nice run at it and give him a chance to, get one of those jackets whenever he decides to hang it up. Not that I have any clue when that'll be, because I could see this guy coaching until he's 80 if he wants to.
Like I said, he's the youngest old coach I've ever seen. So he could definitely. Everyone talks about Tom Brady hanging it up at old age. Like, Pete's going to hang it up whenever he wants, and no one's going to say boo because he's
Yeah.
just that good. Now, you talked about, him being a feel good guy and all that. And you mentioned that Cade Spinello, super fan, who has one of the greatest relationships with Josh Allen. It came to light. I think ESPN did a piece on it, with their relationship and just how tight they are. He's a cancer survivor, and he's just an unbelievable person. Not necessarily talking about his specific situation, but how cool is it, Yogi? You're definitely closer to this because you're closer to a lot of the athletes at the college level and obviously knowing around the West Coast some of the pros. How cool is it when you get to know these guys and then see them understanding their fame, understanding their position, and doing the right thing with these types of stories and with these types of people and building these amazing relationships?
Yeah, man. I mean, Super Cade is a huge part of our family. Um, I just think that often in sport and football specifically, per this conversation, we can forget why we have the ability to work in it and what the ball can do. I've always felt that we all speak ball and there's a true power to play. And a small, awkwardly shaped ball inspired us to fall for it. It inspired older people to play it, leagues to be formed, television networks to buy it and broadcast it. And it continues to showcase what can happen when you chase a dream. So here comes Cade Spinello, who's beaten cancer multiple times, loves the game, and just starts pulling on the red thread. Jordan Palmer, Carson's younger brother, brings him around the Elite 11 quarterbacks, and all of a sudden he's taking pictures with Aaron Rodgers and hanging out with Deshaun Watson and Josh Allen and Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen, and Jim Mora brings him to UCLA and offers him a scholarship. And all of us, we do a feature on the Pac-12 networks. ESPN mirrors it and does a feature on their platform. Like, it just starts to happen because of the power of the game, and that's why we exist. It's a me world. Build my brand, which I get and understand and I'm a part of, but the minute we think we're bigger than the game or don't give back through the game, I think we lose the essence of why we got involved in it. So Cade is a great example of somebody who continues to be inspired by the game and now inspires the people playing or working in it more than he used to be. He used to get inspired by watching Deshaun. Deshaun gets inspired now by watching Cade.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing.
No, it definitely has to go, just like, looking at things that you've done, you're big on finding the humanity in sports. So this definitely has to go with one of your, I guess, missions as a professional and as a person. Tell me a little more about what you've discovered on your quest in finding the humanity in sports. Do you have any, besides Cade, obviously he sticks in your head and for a great reason, any other stories that you can tell right now that stick in your head, that stand out, that kind of shape and show what you mean by finding the humanity in sports?
Every day, I just did one, and it's the coolest part of the job, to be honest. Like, I'll stand at the 50 and call our game on the Pac-12 networks every weekend. And my role and responsibility is to compete to share as many stories as I can, celebrate the game, and coach the viewer, period. So I need to know more than just 2 lines on Justin Herbert or 2 lines on KJ Costello.
Yep.
Or 2 lines on Chris Peterson. Like, I got to know more, and that's my job. So where's the payoff is either allowing a fan to pause before they say, actually, he's a good dude. Like, nobody's trying to drop a ball, right? And
Yeah.
we did it with Justin. I don't know if you saw it. It was on YouTube before the Rose Bowl. I interviewed him and showed him a video where Justin Wilcox, Cal's coach, Mike Leinart, Mark Sanchez, and Joey Harrington all sent a message to him basically saying, hey, man, great career. Good luck in the game. Thanks for everything you do. And all of a sudden, Justin Herbert is quiet, soft-spoken, starts crying. And he's like, wow, like, that meant a lot to me. I can't believe my time's coming to an end. Thanks for the appreciation. Like, that's the human side. I always tell every athlete when I talk to these teams is that you put on your armor to play, unlike any other sport, and people don't see what's underneath your helmet. You're not a brand, you're a person. Like, you're bigger than a brand. Like, you've got a heartbeat. And I think it's just my job to try to find them all the time, whether it's saying hi to somebody, pregame that never plays, or a practice, or doing a feature and bringing a crew, or doing a doc or a podcast, whatever it is. I just think that's the role that I have in sport.
Yeah, how about Russell Wilson asking Doug Peterson Carson Wentz's health after the
Yeah.
game? Like, and people made a big deal about that. And, obviously it's just Russell Wilson. He's just a nice guy, but it just goes to show, like you said, that there are people under there. And I think Russell Wilson's the greatest example of not letting himself be a brand. He really doesn't. You could tell just by the guy he is. He's a very straight and narrow business like type guy, but he's a person first. And that's a cool thing to see. You don't see it often. You see guys, like you said, trying to push their brand. And I get it. Obviously I'm trying to push my brand here with the podcast. We're all trying to compete in a way, but at the same time, I enjoy what you're doing and trying to seek out the humanity in the athletes, like you said, who's under the helmet, not just the logo and the name on the back of the jersey.
Got it. Yeah, I love that, man. That's awesome. And it's great. It's a great lens to operate with daily, as we're all chasing to grow our lives and careers and bank accounts and, whatever. But when you're in sport, I've always felt when you think you're bigger than the game, it's when the game's going to slap you down. And it's happened to coaches. I'll never forget it, and I got no problem sharing it. But when Charlie Weiss took the Notre Dame job and he said, we're going to have a sizable schematic advantage, I was like, he's done. You're not bigger than the game,
Nope.
And I think there's just a respect there that sometimes it can get lost.
Perfect example in football specifically is whenever, in all sports in general, whenever there is that special needs child that is a massive fan of the sport, and maybe they were a manager from freshman year to senior year, and last game, it could be a rivalry game, the coach lets this kid get the pads on and hands him the football, and every single kid on that field, whether or not that kid is a blue chip prospect, going to this school, going to that school, they're going to, allow them to score that touchdown. It's fantastic.
Yeah. It's always it's always a tearjerker. My friends and I always say, like, oh, it just got dusty in here, because we're all crying whenever we watch that type of piece.
But all right, listen, we could talk all day, but we got to close this out. We have to do it again at some time, Yogi.
Yeah, I'd love to, man. Whatever I can do to help, let me know. It's been fun conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So anywhere, anything you want to plug, anything you want to let people know where to find you.
I just think biggest thing for me right now is just my podcast. You can just go to yogiroth.com and check it out, or wherever you listen to your podcast. It's called The Yogi Roth Show. And it's been fun. We're in season 5. We've been pretty knee deep in some really fun guests. Matt Hasselbeck, Ricky Williams closed out the year. I got John Gordon. He's a best-selling author. Just interviewed him today. That'll come out tomorrow or whenever this airs. That'll be the next one you can listen to. And we've got some fun ones. I'm going to talk to Tony Franklin, who coached Jared Goff. That one will be coming up.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to it'll be pretty dope. I talked to one of the greatest magicians in the world, because magicians to me have to have true mastery, and quarterbacks to me have to have true mastery, and they got to hide it. And I thought it was a cool parallel. So you'll love, I'm talking to this guy who was a multimillionaire at 22 and broke at 23, which is pretty much a lot of how NFL players operate too. So there's some cool parallels, and we'll stretch the boundaries a little bit in the off season and talk to some coaches and players. And, I'm always looking forward to feedback. So if everybody wants somebody or got some suggestions, please hit me up.
That sounds like fun. I'll definitely be giving it a listen. And again, I'm Alex Cuesta, host of the Sports Opinions podcast. Find me on Twitter and Instagram, _Cuesta30. Find Sports Opinions on Twitter, Sports Opinion 30, Instagram, Sports Opinions 30. Visit the Facebook page by searching for Sports Opinions Podcast and listen to this anywhere you can find a podcast: Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, YouTube, etc. Once again, Yogi Roth, Pac-12 Network, college football analyst, podcast host, filmmaker. Thank you so much for coming on again, Yogi. Everybody, have a good one.